Hey, Veta VA, this is Brian Dix. I'm in Rancho Cucamonga, California, and I've been with Veta VA since about July of 2019. And one thing I wanted to go over with everybody is cash to close. Now, this is not the same as closing costs, but these terms get used interchangeably sometimes, and that's why I feel that it's important that we go over a few things here. So a couple key takeaways here is that this is not the same as closing costs. This includes your prepaid taxes and insurance, prepaid interest, and any closing costs that are going to be involved in the transaction. But it may also include a down payment if it's applicable, any payoffs to credit cards or any other debt, and if it's a purchase, then the earnest money deposit, that's going to be deducted from this ultimately, and I'll show you where that happens here. So Britton McKay did a great job of covering the loan estimate and the escrow section of the loan estimate as well. So one thing I wanted to focus on is that he points this out, but this is something that, again, they're right by each other and they can be confusing. So we've got estimated closing costs, which is going to show your loan cost or your actual closing costs. And then that bigger number there, which is going to be your prepaid taxes and insurance, then deduct any lender credits or any other credits that are on there. And then your bottom line is that estimated cash to close. Now, this is at the bottom of page 1 of your loan estimate, but it gets broken down a little bit further on page 2 of your loan estimate. But I want to focus a little bit more intently on this section G here. So why I'm focusing on this is that we're looking at your property taxes here, and this is assuming on a refinance we're going to be closing in September. This may vary state by state, but here in California, I got a little table that I'll go over of what we use for estimates. And if we close in September, that means our first payment's going to be due on November 1st. So we've got to set aside a certain amount of money within that escrow or impounds account if we want our bank to pay our property tax bill and our insurance bill from our monthly mortgage. So if we want them to do that for us, then we've got to set aside a certain amount of funds here, and this changes depending on which month you close. So if in September, we're gonna have to set aside 9 months. Now that's not just because it's the 9th month, that's because the lender needs enough money in this account to have a little bit of buffer here to make sure they have enough funds to cover that first property tax installment that's due in November. The next one's gonna be due in February, and you've made a few payments by then, and now they should have enough in that account to cover your February payment. So going down here, it's going to say total closing costs on section J, and it's going to be sections D plus I. Well, that's a little deceiving because that's also including that section G there, and that's not technically a closing cost. Your property taxes, those aren't closing costs. Those are prepaid escrows that you're basically setting money aside to pay those taxes and insurance. Those aren't fees that a lender's charging you. That's just money that your county or whatever entity is collecting. And then you're going to have any lender credits applied here. And then you're going to see your bottom line, how it's broken down, your total closing costs, or that section J. And then it's going to have any part that's financed from your loan, any down payment if it's a purchase, and any deposit. Say if your deposit was $5,000, that's going to be labeled here, and that's going to be subtracted from that amount, and so your bottom line on the estimated cash to close would be lower. Now, I want to go over this little table that I mentioned here, this impounds table, and this is just a little cheat sheet that I use, but I mentioned that scenario where if we were closing in September, then our first payment's going to be due in November, and that means we're going to have to set aside 9 months of prepaid property taxes. So now if we change that and we close in October, now we only have to set aside 4 months. The reason we have to do that, though, is that your property tax bill is already going to be paid. Now, who pays that is going to be up for interpretation, but with the new bank, they're going to definitely make sure that that's paid. Now, this second scenario I'm going over, this is an offshoot of that first one, but I've changed a couple things here. And as you can see, the estimated closing costs seem to be a little bit higher, but that's just because the prepaids are actually a little bit higher. And then your estimated cash to close is going to be much higher, and that's because I rolled something else in here. I rolled a payoff in here, and I'll go over that. So going back to section G, this is assuming we're closing in October and your first payment's going to be due December 1st. So your property tax bill has it's already due. Your previous lender that you're refinancing out of, they would have paid that property tax bill, but we paid them off with the new loan. So you're going to get refunded any balance that's left over in that escrow or impounds account that you have with that lender. But we need to make sure that your property tax bill is paid. So in this instance, the new lender is going to require that that property tax bill is paid through closing or through settlement. So even though we're setting aside 4 months of prepaid property taxes, we've also got to pay that first installment that's due on November 1st. So in reality, it's not much different than that first scenario. Is if we're closing in September, your payments just due a little bit later. Now, the reason why this cash to close is so much higher is because I've added a payoff here. And this may happen to where if there's maybe a debt to income ratio issue and we need to lower that down and pay off some debt, then we can pay off that debt through escrow or through closing, and that's going to be also added to the cash to close. So anyways, hope this is informative. It's hopefully shows you a little bit of the differences between the cash to close and the closing costs and why those two terms can't always be used interchangeably. Thanks.